Arvind Subramanian, former economic advisor, chief economic advisor, and now at Harvard. Thank you very much, Arvind, for joining us. I just want to ask you first, have we all understood how big this is? Or are we kind of still thinking maybe it's not too bad? What's different about this crisis?
Yeah, thanks, Pranoy. First of all, thanks for having me on the show. I think that when people think about, the economic dimensions of this crisis, our mental frames were, saying, okay, let's compare it to the global financial crisis that happened, 10, 12 years ago.
Right.
And this is something that's just absolutely different from that in three respects. It's much, much bigger. It's much, much more uncertain, and it's much more unusual. And let me just quickly elaborate on each of these. You've seen all the headline numbers in terms of all around the world, how quickly unemployment has shot up, how quickly vast parts of the economy have just shut down completely. But the one way of thinking about it is, the global financial crisis, there was one big shock in one country that went to the rest of the world. In this crisis, it's like every big economy has been hit very badly, and that's also transmitting to every other economy in the world. So it's like 100 shocks, not one shock, and each of that shock is probably 10 times bigger than what it was in the global financial crisis. So I think that's very big. It's also very uncertain, unlike other shocks, in I think two dimensions. One, there's the uncertainty about all this, how fast it'll spread, whether systems can handle it, etc., etc. But there's also this human dimension of uncertainty. How long can societies take all these measures that are being taken, like social distancing? Can people put up with it? If not, what is their saturation level for this? How will that pan out? How will that collapse? So that's uncertainty. The third uncertainty in terms of the response is how unusual it is. It's not a conventional economic crisis where, demand comes down or the financial sector collapses. It's a shock where, both demand and supply are affected. Not just manufacturing, but also services sectors have been affected a lot. And so part of the response is that you cannot respond too much because, basically the non-essential sectors of any economy, which could be 30, 40, 50, 60%, have to shut down for a very long period of time. Therefore, how we have to respond is not to bring up the economy, but actually to cushion those who necessarily will have to stop working in some ways. So in these three dimensions, it's just completely different from what we've seen. We're in really uncharted waters.